Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Miro and Paperlike. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. What's up?
Oh, I've been digging deep into these OS betas, and we've got some things to talk about today. I know you've been doing the same. We've been playing around with shortcuts. We've been playing around with the changes to the various apps. And we thought it would be fun today to go a little more in depth in some of the Apple built-in apps and talk about what's changed, because we covered a little bit of this last week during our WWDC coverage, but there was so much going on that there are some details that we didn't cover then that we really want to go over now, things people can look forward to in the fall or on the public betas if they use those.
Right. Yeah, it's the kind of iOS 14 and iPadOS 14, they seem like the kind of release where there's a lot of like smaller features and like quality of life enhancements
Right.
that like there are fewer like major groundbreaking changes, right? Like there's no major multitasking revamp. And I mean, of course, there's the widgets on the iPhone. So that's possibly like the one big feature this year. But in terms of apps, there are a lot of welcome improvements, but a lot of them are like smaller and like these things that Apple fixed. We thought, why don't we go over some of these other app-related changes that we saw at WWDC, and why don't we start with messages? So messages on the Mac obviously is now built in with the Mac Catalyst technology, bringing the app. Bringing some sort of feature parity with the app between the Mac and iOS and iPadOS. So that's very nice to see. But there are also some other improvements that Apple sort of kind of liberally took from WhatsApp and other modern messaging apps and brought them over to Messages and iMessage. So the big one for me, at least, well, there's two of them. First, there's the ability to pin conversations to the top of the screen, to the top of the list view of all your messages. So you can pin in a bunch of different ways. You can use the context menu by long pressing a conversation, or once you have pinned something, you can also use drag and drop to take a conversation and put it toward the top of the list. And at the top of the list, your pins will look like round profile pictures based on the photo that you've assigned to a group, which is also new in iOS 14, or based on the contact photo of the person that you've pinned. And I don't know about you, John, but I've immediately started using this feature. So I've pinned you, my girlfriend, our group conversations, some other close friends to the top of the screen. So now I have a very easy way to get back to those frequently used conversations, which I also think works well in terms of muscle memory, because now those pins are always in the same position. They form a grid. Therefore, it's become already quite easy for me to instantly remember, for example, Sylvia is top left and John is in the middle and our group chats are at the bottom. So I think it's a very cool design that is going to save me a lot of time.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. I've got 6 right now. I've got the top row is 2 group conversations with you separating the two, so I know which is which, and then my family down below. So yeah, it's been really nice. I've used it a lot, and it makes getting in and out of a conversation a lot faster.
Also taken from WhatsApp is the ability to mention specific people directly in a conversation, as well as to reply to specific messages. These were some of the best features from WhatsApp: the ability to mention somebody by name, to draw their attention, or to just reply to somebody specifically. And I love the way that the new inline replies look in messages. So you can tap and hold on a specific message and you will get a new reply button. And when you send the reply, you will sort of get like these lines connecting the original message with your specific reply. And if you tap on a button in between those lines, the thread will expand as like a pop-up on top of the ongoing conversation. It's a very cool design that allows you to keep following the main conversation while also digging deeper into a thread. It's a very cool way to reply to a specific question, and especially in groups of people where maybe multiple things are being said at the same time. It was a necessary addition, and I'm glad that Apple made this happen, especially with this very cool design that they have.
Yeah, the long pressing now does a lot more in messages because you have your tap back options kind of floating on top of the message, above the message, and then below you have reply, copy, and more. And more is just that one that has been there forever where you can delete individual messages and that sort of thing. But it's not retracting a message, it's just deleting it from inside your phone.
Right. So I mentioned the ability to set a group photo or an emoji. You can also, of course, because of mentions, you can choose to be notified with the messages and notifications only when you're mentioned. So that's
Mm-hmm.
also very cool. And obviously, there are new options for memoji expressions and stickers. I think Apple mentioned, of course, face coverings for face masks, new headwear options. And I don't know if this is correct, but Sylvia mentioned now you can mix and match earrings for the left and right ear. I know
Mm-hmm.
she was playing around with her Memoji. She has an updated one. So yeah, I think overall, between all these features, is much necessary improvements for group conversations and the ability to pin messages to pin specific conversations to the top of the sidebar, and the fact that there's now feature parity between all instances of the messages app across platforms. I think it's a very solid series of updates this year.
Yeah, it really is. And anytime you can refine notifications, I'm happy with that because, you might have a group thread with a bunch of people that's very active and you kind of need to keep track of it, especially when someone's talking to you. So you don't really want to mute it, but with the new notifications when you're mentioned, you can do that and you'll get those notifications still, which is fantastic. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Miro. Miro is the online whiteboard that brings teams together. Their infinite canvas is perfect for brainstorming, making mock ups, organizing files, and managing complex projects. They even have templates to help you get started super quickly. On top of that, you could actually host a meeting right within the same frame as your collaborative whiteboard, which makes it a super handy tool because it means that you can discuss items as you go with your teammates. This is the sort of thing that when we are doing project planning for things like WWDC would have come in really handy because we could describe by drawing the exact layout we need for each article for special event coverage like that. Miro has over 5 million users and 80% of the Fortune 100 companies use it. Those are some pretty amazing numbers. And Miro can integrate with the programs you already use, things like Google Drive, Dropbox, Jira, Slack, and a whole lot more. Start collaborating for free when you sign up for an account at miro.com/appstories. That's miro.com/appstories to sign up for a free account with unlimited team members. Go there now and check it out. Again, that URL is miro.com/appstories for a free account. Our thanks to Miro for their support of the show. Another app, Federico, that got changed this year is Home. And we've talked about Home a lot in the past. It still has the tile design, which is not my favorite, but it has gained a lot of new features. There is now suggested automations when you set up a new accessory. And this reminds me, this is a little bit like what they're doing in the Shortcuts gallery, or they're supposed to start doing. I haven't seen these yet, but suggested automations
Mm-hmm.
for your home devices. So say you set up a light and it'll suggest some kind of setup, some sort of automation that you might want to use for that, turning it on off at night or whatever it might be. I haven't played around with this yet, but looking because I haven't had any new devices, but I think I might have a plug somewhere around that's not currently set up that I could test this out with.
So I was playing around with this today. What is also nice is that,
Oh, you were?
yeah, what is also nice is that if you have an existing accessory in home,
Mm-hmm.
and if you go to the edit screen for that accessory, you will see some
Oh,
like default suggestions for you, like turn this off when the last person leaves home, or turn it on when the occupancy sensor detects motion. Like those
right.
are like always available in the configuration screen for any accessory.
Yeah, and then a new part of the various room screens is a series of circles at the top which gives you the status of various sensors in a
Mm-hmm.
room. And so, like, for instance, in our front room, I've got a door sensor connected to my front door. And so it's telling me right now that that door is closed. And it's telling me what the temperature is in that room because there's a thermostat in that room, that sort of thing, as well as it'll detect things like if you have CO2 sensors in the room or motion sensors or all that kind of stuff. And it's just a nice little way to, this kind of thing was at the top of the home screen, the home tab of the app, where you could see the status of a bunch of things, but it was just text and it
Yeah.
was a little hard to parse. Now it's been kind of separated out into the rooms. It's also on the home tab, but separated out into the rooms too with iconography makes it a lot easier to read what's going on, which I like.
Yeah.
Another welcome addition is to cameras. We got the HomeKit Secure Video last year, and it took a while for that to roll out to cameras. And I've been using it, and I've had better luck than I did initially, where there were a lot of bugs going on there. But in doing that and moving some of my Logitech Circle cameras to the Apple HomeKit system, I lost features because those cameras were no longer available in the Logitech app. So now, though, Apple's feature does have activity zones, so you can block out areas that you don't want to, detect motion or detect or start recording video. For instance, if you live on a busy
Mm-hmm.
street, and the camera happens to be pointing partly at the street, you can block out the street. There's also for things like doorbells with cameras in them, like HomeKit ones, where you can recognize who's at the door, which is kind of neat, and it gets
Yeah.
announced on the HomePod.
Yeah, and that's
If you
also
have
super cool the way that you set
Yeah,
it up.
it is.
Actually, you can go into, so if you open a camera in iOS 14 and if you go to the configuration, you will see a new option for face recognition. And if you enable it, it's off by default. And if you enable it, basically Home will ask you, do you want to share your photo library with
Mhm.
HomeKit? And you can choose yes, and then you gotta flip a couple of toggles. But essentially, what you do is you enable your photo library as a source, and then you allow Home to access your faces, which would be like the people that you've tagged in photos. That you've
Right.
like you say, this is my wife, this is my husband, this is my kid, my friend, all kinds of people you can tag in photos. And then those names will be used by face recognition in HomeKit. So I think this will be really interesting to see. Like, I want to see in practice how accurate it is, especially like maybe this is a silly example, but sometimes photos gets confused between Sylvia and her sister because like
Right.
if the photo like isn't like a very close zoomed in portrait, for example, sometimes it gets confused if like one of them is in the background of a photo, for example. So I want to see if it actually gets it right when motion is detected. And also, this is unrelated to iOS 14, but I don't know about you, John. Well, actually, no, because you don't have any pets. But in
Nope.
theory, HomeKit Secure Video was supposed to support like animal detection, and
Right.
it actually never worked for me. In fact,
Oh, interesting.
let me just say, and I'm trying to come up with a way to say this on the podcast, but let me just say that a specific anatomic part of Zelda was consistently recognized as a face,
Oh no.
but it wasn't really a face.
Oh no.
So hopefully, every single time I'll be like, there's a person at home, and like my heart will skip a bit, and I would
Right.
open the snapshot for the notification. And I was looking
and
at
there you are.
and I was looking at, at Zelda's back, let's say. Just say the back.
Oh, wow.
It's like,
Okay.
that's not a person.
Well,
So-
no, certainly not. Well, now you never know whether you're going to have a burglar or you just got Zelda roaming around the apartment.
Yes.
Wow. That's quite a story, Federico. All right, there's one other feature we should mention, which is Control Center, which has a redesigned home section, and it will actually put in there some suggested things when you're home of, scenes that you use a lot. And I haven't done anything to modify this, and it did a fantastic job because the scenes that I use the most, like shutting off my lights outside, was on there, as well as my garage doors. So I was really happy with that so far.
Yeah, I'm still not convinced about those control center toggles. Because they do change, right? Like they do change during the day.
They
I
do.
I do like the fact that already it hasn't even been a week, and already the system has learned that this scene that I have called "Prepare for Bed," it always comes up in Control Center at night. So that's nice because I
Yep.
do run it at night. But like for example, right now there's two other toggles that I don't really want in there. So
Mm,
I do like though the new look for the favorites screen in Control Center. When you expand the favorites, it opens like this full screen window, and it actually supports navigation inside rooms. Because now when you tap on the favorites toggle for HomeKit in Control Center, it opens a full screen
yes.
page, and the
Right.
page you can scroll. So you can scroll your favorite scenes horizontally, but also you can tap on the favorites label and you can switch between rooms. So it's not just the favorites anymore. You can control an accessory for any room in Control Center. So that's very cool, I think.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's a really nice touch. Why don't we turn to notes? Why don't you lead off on that one?
So notes, I guess the most visible change is the fact that there's no more paper texture. And I know that there's
Right.
some paper loyalists out there who would have preferred the texture to remain, but I just think that the Notes app looks so much cleaner now. That paper background texture was a legacy feature from an old and bygone era that doesn't really work with today's aesthetic anymore, especially with Big Sur on the Mac. I think the app is much cleaner now. It hasn't lost its identity because those yellow and orange tints and colors are still there. So I think Notes still looks like Notes, but it looks cleaner because that paper texture is gone. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's really amazing how long that paper texture stayed around.
So now that's gone and everything looks so much cleaner. There's a redesigned sidebar. So Notes had a sidebar before, and Notes was one of the few apps that supported the 3-column layout on iPad along with Mail before iPadOS 14. But now that the 3-column layout is not a specific feature anymore, it's a system-wide API available to everybody, Notes
Uh-huh.
has switched to the new system default control for the 3 columns and for the sidebar being one of those 3 columns. So there's a new system-wide sidebar that is consistent with Mail, with Files, with Photos, with all the other apps that use a sidebar on iPad now. And obviously this sidebar, because again, it's a system-wide control, it behaves just like any other sidebar in iPadOS 14. If you have a trackpad, you can use swipe gestures to dismiss panels, the sidebar and the middle column and the content panel. You can use the trackpad to open and close them. The sidebar obviously works on all iPad models, and it seamlessly transitions between compact and full and regular size classes, depending on whether you use split view or the iPad in portrait and so forth. So it's a consistent sidebar that behaves just like any other sidebar this year. There's a new topics section in search. So if you have a lot of notes, it should be easier now to find what you're looking for because search is faster and your top results will be highlighted at the top of your search results in notes. The action menu. This is this application is the perfect example of a bunch of features, like a bunch of quality of life enhancements that were all thrown together in this update. There's a redesigned action menu that looks nicer. There's big colorful buttons. There's a new send copy action. So if you want to send a copy of your note to any other application on your iPad or iPhone, you can do that. There's a new send copy button. On the iPhone, you can quickly reformat your text by tapping and holding the format button, the AA button in the text editor. You can tap and hold, and that will show you a pull down menu. And from there, you can quickly scroll to switch from, say, the body text to heading or subheading or bullet list, number list. It's very easy to do. You don't need to tap, open, and manually close the menu anymore. You can just tap and hold, scroll, and change your format. Very nicely done. And there's also an improved scanner. So Apple says that the document scanner now should result in sharper images as well as more intelligent cropping. So that's very nice to hear. And last but not least, the major addition to Notes this year is revamped Apple Pencil integration so that your handwritten text can become actually typed text, and you can select your handwriting, and you can easily copy it or change the color or add more space between two handwriting sections. The Apple Pencil, as we mentioned, is one of the all the changes in Pencil Kit, of course, also apply to notes. So the new color picker and
Sure.
the fact that you have an eyedropper tool now, all of those changes obviously apply to the markup screen in Notes as well. And I mean, all the Apple Pencil stuff is really one of the highlights this year on iPad, and especially in Notes, because Notes, I think it really is. If you don't want to use any third-party apps on your iPad, just go with Notes, and you can use your own handwriting. You can create drawings. You can change colors. It's really well done.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Paperlike. If you have an iPad, you'll know how great it is to store your notes, drafts, and sketches digitally. But sometimes drawing with the Apple Pencil doesn't quite feel right. It doesn't feel as good as writing on actual paper. Paperlike is the iPad screen protector for creators and doers that lets you draw and write just like paper. Whether you're annotating drafts, taking notes, or sketching out your big ideas, Paperlike lets you take things to the next level by reducing muscle fatigue caused by writing on a glass tablet and making your iPad feel just like a notebook, all while preserving the convenience of digital. Artists love Paperlike too because it's optimized to create the ideal amount of friction and the right stroke resistance for optimal accuracy. So instead of sliding your pencil around on a glass surface, it feels just like the page in your sketchbook. And unlike other screen protectors, Paperlike enhances your viewing experience. It's made with superior display quality in mind. Paperlike never disrupts your experience of watching Netflix or YouTube, for example. And the matte anti-glare finish even lets you enjoy screen time while in the sun. The combination of just the right pencil friction and anti-glare is what I like most about Paperlike. It's great for sketching, taking notes, mind mapping, all the while sitting outside enjoying a nice summer day. Go to paperlike.com now to get yours. That's paperlike.com. Our thanks to Paperlike for their support of the show. I want to turn to reminders because I know you've been working in OmniFocus recently, and I've actually been migrating to it as well, though I'm still have one foot in tasks as I kind of move things over, delete them out of tasks, out of reminders, and then add them to OmniFocus. And there are some really great features in reminders. I mean, this has really gotten a lot of refinements this year. I mean, you can now assign reminders to a shared list, which is really nice. There's all these bulk editing features. This is something that I wanted for a very long time. You can tap an edit button, and then you have a toolbar along the bottom that appears and allows you to, after having picked a bunch of messages, to do things like change the date, move the list, flag, mark things as completed, or delete them. And the addition of the new date picker too is fantastic because it's so much easier to add date and times with this picker, I think, than using the tumblers.
Yeah, it's very nicely done. It's one of my favorite changes, I would say, this year. And yeah, I'm going to use this a lot. And also the fact that I can assign a reminder to a specific person in a shared list, it's also going to be very nice. I also appreciate how you can use an emoji for a list
That's nice,
instead of using one of the built-in symbols. You can now I was playing around with this and I've switched all my lists to use emoji now. So they look a lot nicer than before. Also because, like, weirdly enough, while SF Symbols has something like 2,500 symbols now in iOS 14, Apple only has a selection of like 60 of them for reminders, which I don't fully understand. I haven't actually tested this, but in theory, just like Siri could suggest you to create a reminder based on an iMessage. So if Siri would detect in iMessage that somebody was telling you you were supposed to do something or remind you to do something, Siri could surface that suggestion in reminders and say, I found this in your iMessage. Do you want to create a reminder for it? And now, in theory, the same feature should be supported in mail. So if Siri recognizes that somebody is telling you to do something in mail, in a mail message, in theory, you should be seeing that suggestion in the reminders sidebar as well. Also, you should have better support for finding specific metadata of reminders, such as notes, people, and locations. I would love to see the ability to find rich links or URLs as well. So we're gonna see. We're gonna have to see how it goes. And of course, we mentioned this before, but for context, reminders has now deeper integration with shortcuts as well. So you can create reminders that have rich links from shortcuts. This was not previously possible. And you can also retrieve subtasks from reminders in shortcuts. And I hope that by the final release of iOS 14, shortcuts gains the option to create subtasks as well, not just retrieve them. I would love to have some kind of action in shortcuts that would say, create a reminder, but actually make this reminder part of a parent reminder of another one, so that it becomes a subtask. That would be really nice.
Yeah, that would be terrific. You know, Federico, probably the app on the Mac that got the most attention this year was Safari. I mean, we've already talked about things like Notes and Messages, which got, and I guess Maps too is also catching up with what is on iOS. But I wanted to talk specifically about Safari because it really got a lot of changes. And some of those are under the hood because Apple said that Safari is now 50% faster than Chrome when accessing common websites. It's also supposedly has 3 hours more battery life when you're streaming video than either Chrome or Firefox, and an extra hour if you're just doing general web browsing. So, you know, those are always nice additions when you're on a laptop and you've got limited battery life. And speed is always a great thing to add as well. But when it comes down to features, the first thing I think people will notice is when they open a new tab, there's a brand new start page. And that start page is highly customizable now. There's a set of curated wallpapers that you can use for the background of that start page, or you can just drag in one of your own images from Photos or the Finder and use that instead if you prefer. The sections of that start page are customizable too. So some of these have been here before, but they weren't as customizable. You can choose to include series suggestions, favorites, a reading list items, iCloud tabs, and a summary privacy report, all of which are nice ways to kind of make that start page your own. And, you know, speaking of privacy, there's a new button in the toolbar, which is a privacy button. So if you're on a particular web page, you can click that and it'll give you a summary of all the trackers and things that are detected for that page. And then you can drill in and see a much more detailed view if you want to get a real good sense for what exactly that website is doing, which is always nice to have that sort of information so you can decide whether you really want to be on that site or not. One of the bigger changes, though, in terms of like day-to-day functionality, I think, is it with extensions, because extensions now are going to have their own section in the Mac App Store. And even more important, I think, is that they're going to allow ones based on the Web Extensions API. And what that means is that extensions built for things like Chrome will be available in Safari. So that's going to widen the available extensions out there significantly. What's really nice about Safari, though, is that you can control what access those extensions have. You know, you can limit them to a particular website, and you can also limit how long they have access to it. So you don't have to worry as much about an extension capturing your keystrokes, for instance, regardless of what tab you're in and that sort of thing, which is one reason I am very careful about the extensions that I've used in the past. And knowing that I can limit it and control what they have access to gives me a lot more peace of mind about using them in the future. The other kind of design change that we saw is a change to tabs. You'll be able to see more tabs, and they'll have colored favicons at the top. So you'll be able to I think based on what I've seen, you'll be able to identify those tabs better. Plus, when you hover over with your pointer, you'll get a little mini preview of that web page. So you'll have a sense for what that page happens to be, even if all you're seeing in the tab itself is the favicon. And then finally, it's worth noting too that there's on-the-fly translation for, I think it's 7 languages, so that you can go to those sites, and as you scroll, it's going to translate. Now, I haven't had a chance to try this and see how good the translations are, but it's certainly a nice thing to be able to do if you're on a website that's not in your native language. All right, Federico. Well, I still feel like we've just barely scratched the surface for WWDC. I mean, we've got a lot to talk about, and that's great. We'll have a lot of episodes all summer long talking about this stuff, talking about what we think is coming down the pike for third-party developers, what we're hearing that they're excited about and what they're doing with their apps. So it's going to be an interesting run all the way through to the fall when the OSs are released. I want to thank our 2 sponsors again. That's Miro and Paperlike. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is at Viticci on Twitter and Instagram. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.